New Orleans Saints quarterback Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shough finally hit the football field, and depending upon what you like, you might have a front runner in this quarterback competition. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe coming up for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, preseason game 1 is in the books, and there still feels like there's some concerns around the New Orleans Saints that feel unfortunately familiar to last year. We'll break that down. We'll also take a look at some of the defensive standouts, including a rookie who has built a lot of momentum going into this game and cashed it out against the Chargers as well. And we're going to kick everything off with, of course, the quarterback battle. And depending upon what you like, you might have a new front runner in the quarterback conversation. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, making us your first listen, being an everydayer, and of course, checking out the show here, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. New Orleans Saints quarterbacks Tyler Shough, Spencer Rattler finally hit the field and get an opportunity to take this quarterback battle to an actual NFL game, preseason game, but still an actual NFL game. And depending upon what you like, you might have a new front runner. I don't know that I have a new front runner yet, but I will tell you this. I do think that Tyler Shough has narrowed the gap. The big thing is, what do you prefer? And this is the question that the New Orleans Saints would have to answer if they were naming a starting quarterback right now, which they obviously won't be. But if they were naming a starting quarterback right now, the big question that they have to answer is, are they okay with the big swings to either extreme, or do they want somebody that's going to play a little bit more down the middle, perhaps a little bit more predictably and a little bit more reliably? Those are going to be the biggest things. You want the guy that's going to be able to go out there and make the big plays, or do you want the guy that has shown all throughout training camp that he can kind of, keep things steady as he goes through? I think right now the steady guy so far has been Spencer Rattler, and the guy that's playing to the extreme so far, at least in today's game, is Tyler Shough. Now remember, the Saints are going to have to take into account way more than just this game at SoFi Stadium against the Los Angeles Chargers when it comes to making the decision around the quarterback competition, right? They're going to have to take into account the remaining preseason games. They're going to have to take into account everything from training camp. And now, of course, there's another week of practices, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And they're trying to potentially get some joint practices with the Los Angeles Rams on Thursday that could even further that conversation more. But I do think that for me, coming out of this game, I think Tyler Shough has closed the gap a little bit, but hasn't done enough yet consistently to be able to take the reins and become the favorite when it comes to the quarterback battle. For me, the big reason why is because of those extremes. Tyler Shough led a 2-minute drive at the end of the first half that resulted in 3 points. He then threw a 54-yard touchdown to Mason Tipton deep down the left sideline that resulted in those in additional points. And those were the points that the New Orleans Saints scored outside of one late field goal by Charlie Smith. But he also put points on the board for the other team. A pick six by Eric Rodgers going the other way, trying to hit the out route. To Tyler Shough's credit, not throwing from the opposite hash, which I hate. I hate when quarterbacks try to throw out routes from the opposite hash, but he ends up trying to throw to the near hash or from the near hash. It gets picked off, hung up a little bit too long, run back by Eric Rodgers on a pick six for Los Angeles Chargers. So are you okay getting those big plays that the New Orleans Saints clearly loved when they went through Tyler Shough's, draft evaluation, his time at Louisville, all of that, knowing that you risk the big plays going the other way as well? Or do you want the guy that's going to be able to kind of walk you through something that's a little bit closer to center? Spencer Rattler was 7 of 11 today. Out of his 17 dropbacks, he was under pressure 6 times. That's 34%. He went into the game two plays in, loses his starting center. That should sound familiar to Saints fans. We'll get to that in a little bit. But didn't turn the ball over. Oh, sorry, no, but he had the sack fumble, and so that was an offensive line thing, and then he ends up getting sacked and he turns the ball over as well. So I think the biggest thing that Tyler Shough can do to help himself is to take sort of keep the high level plays, but take sort of those lower level plays and just scooch him closer to center, right? So that maybe you throw an interception. Like if he goes into this game and throws the interception, but it's not a pick six, we're probably talking about his day a lot differently. If he completes that pass down the right sideline to Kevin Austin Jr., which I think was really kind of just a little bit of nerves, put too much on it, then you're probably looking at a second touchdown. You're probably talking about his day a lot differently. You're talking about his day as being the best day by any rookie quarterback likely throughout this first weekend of the preseason. I'm not counting the Hall of Fame game, of course. And so I think the best thing that Tyler Shough can do is kind of creep up that bottom level of his plays. But I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing sort of this quarterback competition potentially narrow here, and why next week is going to be super important as the Saints head home to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. And in that game, I suspect you'll see Tyler Shough get the start, with Spencer Rattler being second in line there, because that's typically how you handle these things. You have one start and the other one is second, and then you reverse that going into the next game. I suspect we'll probably see that when the Saints head back home for next weekend's game up against Jacksonville. And so I think the whole conversation around this battle really comes down to the narrowing of the gap more than an exchange of kind of the leader in the clubhouse, if you will. Like, it still feels like Spencer Rattler has the lead as the guy that's maybe produced more consistent play, but Spencer Rattler's high-end plays have kind of been all over the field, from going all the way back to training camp, going all the way back to OTAs and everything as well. Although Spencer Rattler also, let's not forget, just 2 days ago connected with Rashid Shaheed down the left sideline, a guy that didn't play along with Chris Olave and several other starters, for a big touchdown in training camp practice. And so with all that being taken into account, maybe you are seeing swings from both of these guys. But I think under the lights, you saw the more major swings from Tyler Shough than you saw from Spencer Rattler's day on Sunday. So it's just going to come down to which is held and what is more persistent moving forward, right? If that ends up not being the case for either one of these quarterbacks as they move forward, that certainly helps their conversation as they continue to vie for that starting role. But if it stays the same, it's all going to be about which one this New Orleans Saints team feels that they're better off going with to start everything off with. So, look, I think we spoke to Spencer Rattler. He said that he had plays that he definitely wanted back. Had he felt the pressure on the strip sack, he would have just taken off and run. He was actually the team's leading receiver with 22 rushing yards. All of the running backs combined for just 29 rushing yards. So not a very successful day on the ground to help out either one of these quarterbacks, for that matter. Tyler Shough would have clearly wanted that interception back, clearly probably wanted that missed pass to Kevin Austin Jr. back as well. But I thought that we saw some good things. We saw both of these guys making plays with their legs, whether it was in the run game or, like, Tyler Shough had a really nice one where he was working opposite his body, had to turn his shoulders in and try to get a pass out to Mason Tipton, who was running a crossing route. It was incomplete, but I thought that, like, Mason Tipton worked his way open. If Tyler Shough's able to get that ball just a little bit further upfield and a little bit closer to where Mason Tipton was, you're probably looking at a big completion there as well on the run. I think those things are positive. And remember, we saw a lot of just straight dropbacks so far in this first preseason game. And this is typical of the preseason. You go with a vanilla offense, or more basic fundamental looks on your offense and defensive side. And so we saw a lot of straight dropbacks, not a lot of RPOs, not a lot of play action, not even a lot of motion in this first game. And so with all that taken into consideration, I do think that you're going to see these quarterbacks and their performances push and move a little bit further as more of Kellen Moore's offense gets implemented, which we didn't see a lot of here against the Chargers. During the Saints squad show, we were asked to kind of evaluate Kellen Moore's play calling, and we can't because he didn't have his full playbook. And both of those guys, both quarterbacks, had the same playbook. They had the same play sheet that Kellen Moore is calling off of, all these other pieces. And, one of them, or, I don't know that either one of them took more advantage or less advantage. One of them got more opportunities than the other, but I think that's just kind of the way that the snaps worked out. And so now the big things that you're going to be waiting for are, do you see the gap in terms of what's positive and what's negative narrow for either one of these passers? That's going to be big. And then are you going to see either one of these quarterbacks? Well, really, I guess the other thing isn't necessarily either one of these quarterbacks, but Tyler Shough dealing with a bruised knee. When does he get back out on the field? He said it's minor, but wrapped, iced, all that kind of stuff at the end of the game. So we'll see how things look from there. But the Saints are set to hit the practice field again on Tuesday. We'll see where things are for him. And then potentially those joint practices on Friday, another proving ground for these two quarterbacks and this young quarterback duo. But I think as of right now, the thing you can take solace in is that one of these quarterbacks is going to win the battle as opposed to the other one losing, because they're being aggressive, they're taking their shots, and they're going out there and they're trying to make plays. Best case scenario for New Orleans, no matter how the actual regular season ends up going. All right, coming up next, I want to take a look over on the defensive side of the football. 3 defensive standouts that I want to highlight, and I want to start off with the rookie Fadil Diggs, who has just continued to build on the momentum that he has started to gain over the course of the last week or so of practices. Let's dive into all that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Yahoo Fantasy. Today's episode presented by Yahoo Fantasy. We're all playing Yahoo Fantasy, and you should be too, whether you're a first-timer or you're making your millionth league as a fantasy veteran. That fantastic Yahoo Fantasy football app where you can manage everything, do everything you need to do. It's all there for you. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 new features over 28 days in August. To kick it off, they just dropped the Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League, which is a killer new way to play fantasy football over at Yahoo Fantasy, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until only one team is left standing. With the season right around the corner, it's a great time to try out, get your friends together, and give this new mode a try. And look, if you're still into the classics, you can still play head-to-head when it comes to private leagues or join a public league as well. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, family. 3 New Orleans Saints defenders stood out to me on the football field, and they were led by rookie edge rusher Fadil Diggs. I want to highlight defensive tackle, nose tackle Khristian Boyd, as well as linebacker Isaiah Stalbird, who I think is adding again to this fantastic young depth at the linebacker room that we weren't sure we were going to see this season. But let me start off with the edge rusher in Fadil Diggs. Fadil Diggs has had a really strong few days of practice, probably the last week or so of practices, including during the 66th play scrimmage on Friday, where he had a pair of sacks and at least a few pressures as well. He adds to that a sack today, chasing, I think it was Trey Lance, out for a negative 1 yard gain. So it gets credited to him as a sack. But the reason why it gets credited to him as a sack is because he got the pressure. And he had a few other pressures back there as well, to where he put some heat on the young quarterbacks for the Los Angeles Chargers. He had some nice plays in the run game as well. I think I'm liking very much what I'm seeing from Fadil Diggs so far. And remember, he was a guy that coming into the NFL draft, we knew was kind of going to fall because of that transfer from Texas A&M to Syracuse and all that. But him falling all the way down to the 7th round was a big surprise. He was kind of seen as a little bit more of an early day 3, maybe even a late day 2 guy for many of the folks that I spoke to around him. But he actually had 4 tackles, combined tackles on the day. And he also had 2 of those as tackles for a loss, along with his sack for 1 yard. He just had a really strong day all throughout. And he was a part of the reason why I was actually feeling pretty good about the Saints' run defense early on in the game, although it didn't last very long, right? It didn't last all the way through. Like that third unit kind of got gashed up a little bit. But I thought that Fadil Diggs had a really strong day and just continues to build on the momentum that he's already kind of started to build for himself over the course of the last week. I want to highlight another defensive lineman. How about defensive tackle Khristian Boyd? Khristian Boyd getting back there for what I believe was a 7-yard. It was a 7-yard sack that was initially called a safety, but then was ruled to be down on the 1. The thing that really stands out to me about that sack, though, was how Khristian Boyd got there. I asked him to walk us through the play a little bit when we spoke to him in media availability following the game. And he started at that nose tackle 0 technique, and then he had to wrap all the way around to the B gap. So just to kind of fill you in, that 0 technique is right over the center. The B gap is the gap between the guard and the tackle. So he had to skip a gap and get all the way around to that gap between the guard and the tackle. He said that the guard kind of crashed on him. He made him miss with a swim move coupled with a little bit of a rip move as well. And it was able to get back there, got to the quarterback a little bit more quickly than he expected to, but was able to make the play and get the quarterback down, Taylor Heineke at that point. But the thing that I really liked about this was that he wasn't just, making this play because the coverage held up and he, won on his second or third effort. He had to be athletic. He had to get around. He had to move, right? This is a defensive line last year that was kind of asked to just go straight, go ahead. They didn't do a lot of movement pass rushes on the interior. But this is something that Khristian Boyd has been talking about all offseason, that they're being allowed to attack a little bit more as interior pass rushers. They're being asked to pass rush as defensive tackles, particularly from the nose tackle spot as well. And so that stood out. And then the other thing that stood out was the way that he has expanded his pass rush move arsenal after being a guy that was considered a run stopper mostly during his time in college at UNI, although he did have quite a few sacks for an interior defensive lineman during that time. But he has developed more as a pass rusher because of Bo Davis, the New Orleans Saints defensive line coach, who they snagged from the LSU Tigers, walking him through, building up more of those pass rush moves and being able to get after the quarterback. So I think that he did a good job taking all those things that he's been working on over the course of the offseason and then making them pay off in a play that almost was the first score of the game. Unfortunately, got overturned and turned into a sack, but still a sack for Khristian Boyd and still an overall good day. He also had a tackle for a loss. It's an overall good day for the big fella who is looking to take that second year leap here going into 2025. And then the other guy that I wanted to highlight was Isaiah Stalbird. I said Isaiah Foskey earlier, but Isaiah Stalbird is another guy, 4 tackles total, had a tackle for a loss, and it was an emphatic tackle for a loss, met the running back immediately at the mesh point, was able to make a tackle in the backfield for a loss of a few yards. And then he also added 3 special teams tackles as well. So he was all over the field for the New Orleans Saints. And one of the things that's been really impressive for New Orleans over the course of the past, I'll say 2 or so weeks, has really been the linebacker depth. Going into the draft, we thought that linebacker was going to be a big need for New Orleans because they had Demario Davis with over 100 starts, way over 100 starts in his career. Pete Werner with over 40, 50 starts in his career. And then no more starts and only a couple of games played by Nephi Sewell in terms of actually playing defense, right? Isaiah Stalbird saw some elevations last year and then got some opportunities later on in the season as well. But not a lot of experience behind the starters at linebacker. But over the course of the past couple of weeks, right, new rookie Danny Stutzman's looked solid. Jalen Ford has had a really, really good week, which, by the way, he capped off with Sunday, leading the team with 8 tackles over on the defensive side as well. So he has continued his strong week. I think that we've seen really good things from Nephi Sewell, who had 2 interceptions throughout camp. Now you add in Isaiah Stalbird, who started off at linebacker, transitioned over to safety by the end of last year. Now he's kind of back at linebacker, playing linebacker for the team, and then had a really strong day today. So I really like kind of where things are headed for the Saints depth-wise over on the defensive side, because all 3 guys that we just highlighted are talented young players, but they're not going to be starters in this system. Fadil Diggs is at least going to be behind guys like Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson, and then I would even probably put Chase Young, Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan, and then I would even put potentially Chris Rumph ahead of Fadil Diggs. And then we didn't get a chance to see Jasheen Davis, who's looked awesome over the course of the past few weeks as well. And so we got to factor him in. But Fadil Diggs, not a starter in this system. Khristian Boyd, not starting over Devon Godshaw. Might see some opportunities around Colin Saunders, but not starting over Devon Godshaw. And then Isaiah Stalbird, not starting over Demario Davis and Pete Werner. But all of that's okay. I'm saying that they're not starting over those guys, not because they're not playing well, but because the starters are already embedded in terms of what this team has and what this team is on the defensive side of the football. So the good news is that they're playing well while going up against second, third team guys. I understand the context here, right? We got to understand the context, but we've seen it all throughout camp so far too. And in particular, kind of the momentum lately that has kind of led to some good defensive depth showing up. Where we have not seen good depth so far is on the offensive line. And the New Orleans Saints had one specific offensive lineman have one of the worst days I've seen played at the position. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. You can download the Gametime app now so you can get started tracking down tickets to your favorite events, whether they're sports games, listen to me, whether it's sporting events, whether it's theater, comedy, musicals, like whatever it is that you're into, you're going to be able to find it over at Gametime. And my favorite part is that you can find it all the way down to even an hour after the event begins. A lot of folks even save up to 60% by buying their tickets last minute with Gametime. I love using the Gametime app. You can search by location. So if you're out of town, you decide you want to go and do something, pull up the app, tap wherever you are, and it'll show you all the different things that are going on that night. And you're going to be able to get affordable tickets as that event time gets closer and closer and closer. I love the Gametime app. I know that you will too. One of my favorite parts is being able to toggle on all-in pricing so that none of those pesky fees take you by surprise by the time that you get to checkout. So take all the guesswork out of buying tickets by downloading the Gametime app today. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints saw some familiar issues rear their ugly heads, even though this is just the first preseason game. So I want to be clear. I'm not here to sound the alarms. I'm not here to, disparage what the Saints did achieve on the football field, what they were able to achieve on the football field. But there were a couple of things that looked familiar and concerning when it comes to what we saw on the football field on Sunday. The first thing that I want to highlight is offensive line depth. Offensive line depth did not look good for this team. And the thing that's really challenging about that is that there's already an injury to one of the starting offensive linemen in Trevor Penning. Now, we don't know the extent of that injury just yet, unless there has been an update at some point while I'm recording this or while I'm live here. But outside of all that, the Saints have not had a lot of success, or did not have a lot of success with their offensive line depth. I thought that Dillon Radunz had one of the worst days of NFL offensive tackle football that I've seen in a while. And that came down to giving up a couple of sacks, getting beat on a sack fumble, getting beat on another pressure, getting beat on a tackle for a loss in the backfield, had a procedural penalty of some kind as well. Just a bit of what I would call a meltdown for the veteran offensive lineman. Now, to be fair to Dillon Radunz, he was signed to come in and help the Saints shore up the interior of their offensive line, not play tackle. But with Landon Young dealing with an injury, another one, not another one for him, but another injury to be concerned about on the offensive line, he ended up playing a lot of right tackle while Kelvin Banks Jr. and Trevor Penning were still in the game. And Kelvin Banks Jr. and Trevor Penning moved out, and then he flipped over to left tackle and still kind of struggled. Now, he got better throughout the day as he was playing up against lesser competition, but major red flags for me when it comes to New Orleans Saints offensive line depth. Now, you might be saying, Ross, who cares about offensive line depth? It's the starters that matter. And you're absolutely right. The issue is, the starters won't always be on the field. The Saints won't be able to keep all 5 of their starting offensive line on the field for 17 games. Very few NFL teams can do that. And the Saints are not about to all of a sudden be that team. And so, yes, the depth does indeed matter. So that's why I'm kind of bringing this up now. And it's something that you've heard about, I'm sure, all throughout training camp as well, that the second and third units for the New Orleans Saints on their offensive line have struggled mightily. And those struggles continued today. Now, let me give flowers to Torricelli Simpkins. Torricelli Simpkins, the undrafted free agent, comes in to be the second center on the game day roster for this preseason game behind Will Clapp. Will Clapp goes out with an injury 2 offensive plays into the game, and Torricelli Simpkins essentially plays the entire game at center, a position he might have started playing about a week ago. And so I look at Torricelli Simpkins and I go, man, that's pretty dope. Like, good for him. But I think along the rest of that offensive line, we saw some struggles. And in particular, Dillon Radunz was one of those guys. The other thing that I think was a bit concerning was the injuries, right? 4 injuries. And at one point, the Saints only had 3 points, right? And they had 4 injuries before the Tyler Shough touchdown to Mason Tipton. There was an injury to Will Clapp on the second play of the game that had, he had to be helped off the field. Then he got carted back. He had a shoe off while he's being carted back to the locker room. Trevor Penning carted back, both of his shoes off. But according to Jeff Nowak, sideline reporter, WWL Radio, said that, he looked like he was walking fine going up. So we'll see what happened there. But that's a starter. Then you had Bub Means get carted off, his right shoe off, towel over his head as he was carted off. That's concerning because he had an ankle injury and an ankle injury setback last year that effectively kept him out of his rookie season. And then during a special teams play, newly signed tight end Mason Pline goes down while the Saints are already down 2 tight ends, physically unable to perform in Foster Morrow as well as Taysom Hill. And so I highlight all that to say Saints did a really good job staying healthy all throughout training camp. Did not do a very good job staying healthy here during this game. So a little bit of concern there when it comes to New Orleans. So we'll see where things go. The next thing that kind of stood out to me that was a familiar struggle for this team was penalties. 7 penalties in a preseason game. Now, I will be honest, the referees loved their TV time today, especially in the middle of the game. So everything was getting a flag. But 5 penalties in the first half in particular is where I want to focus. You want to see the Saints erase some of that because one of those penalties that happened in the second half was a penalty on Rico. I believe it was in the second half, but it was a penalty on Rico Payton that led to and turned a drive that would have forced a long punt. It turned it into a 14-play scoring drive. And so this is something we saw the Saints struggle with last year. It's where they would go and they'd make a play on 3rd down, for instance, and then give up a first down penalty. I believe it was actually in the first half, now that I'm thinking about it, but end up giving a first down by penalty that turns into a scoring drive when they could have forced a punt. And so that was something else that was, to me, a familiar struggle for this team that you'd love to see get cleaned up. Now, with all of that said, we have to remember the context. First preseason game, ideally things do get better from here. Things get tighter from here. This is the first time that a lot of these players have taken a football field in actual game competition since January or February, earlier on in the year. So we do have to keep that in, kind of reference, I guess. We have to keep that in scope and all that. And people are highlighting the right thing. Like when it comes to the offensive line depth, like not a lot of teams in the NFL have good offensive line depth. That's pretty true. But you were expecting the Saints offensive line depth to be better than it is. I think that's more so the thing. So we'll see what happens as they get another preseason game under their belt, as they potentially get some joint practices with the Rams under their belt, all those other things. But I do think that, like, if you look back at some of the best teams in the league, those are the teams that have good offensive line depth. So with the Saints kind of in the midst of like a multi-year rebuild process, you'll probably see them address some of that going into next season, things like that. So we'll see where things go. But overall, I think that there were pluses, there were minuses, there were positives, there were negatives. There were things to take away from this game to feel good about, things to take away from this game that I'm sure the New Orleans Saints are going to want to improve going into next week's matchup. That's the nature of the preseason. But as of right now, I will say quarterback battle's a little bit tighter. Some defensive players, particularly defensive depth, absolutely stood out. Some concerns from last year have kind of crept over into the early goings of this year. Let's see how the Saints respond when it comes to addressing, fixing, and improving where some of the struggles were. All right, so coming up in tomorrow's episode, we'll dive into a deeper dive on everything around the New Orleans Saints offense and defense, what we saw. We'll do it by the numbers. We'll also take a deeper dive into the quarterback competition and see where things really stand, and we'll dive into even more. We got all that coming up for you on tomorrow's show. We appreciate you very much, as always. Making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for checking us out, and of course, keeping everything going here on the show. Thank you very much. Making us part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure that you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know what the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.